The scorching sun beamed down on the airport runway, reflecting off the pristine, white exterior of a luxurious private jet. Everything about the plane screamed wealth and power, sleek design, golden accents, and a personalized insignia on the tail. Just a few steps away from the aircraft stood an elderly man, impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit. His silver hair glistened under the daylight, and his posture, though upright, showed signs of age. But his eyes were sharp, focused, and filled with frustration as he gripped a leather briefcase tightly. Suddenly, laughter cut through the tense silence. Two younger men, both dressed in expensive suits, stood casually at the jet's entrance. One of them, in a light beige suit, smirked arrogantly as he crossed his arms. "Are you serious? You think this jet belongs to you?" he said with a mocking tone. The elderly man, Richard Price, kept his composure and pointed firmly at the jet. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the frustration behind it. "This is my jet. I have the documents to prove it," he said. The two men exchanged glances, barely able to contain their amusement. The second man, dressed in a navy blue suit, chuckled. "Sorry, old man, but you don't belong here," said the man in beige, his voice dripping with condescension. Richard's jaw tightened. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer anger bubbling inside him. This jet wasn't just a luxury item, it was a symbol of his life's work, his legacy, built from nothing. And now, these two men, with their smug expressions, were trying to take it away from him. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had spent decades building his business from the ground up. Born in a small town to a single mother, Richard knew the value of hard work. He had put himself through college, often working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. There were nights he barely slept, pushing himself to make his dreams a reality. His dream? To build something that would outlast him, something that would leave a mark on the world. And he did just that. By his 50s, Richard had founded one of the most successful private aviation companies in the world. But for him, it wasn't about fame or status. It was about innovation. His company revolutionized private air travel, making it safer, faster, and more efficient. His clients included world leaders, CEOs, and even celebrities. But despite his success, Richard never lost his humility. He knew that everything he had built could be taken away in an instant. And that moment had come. Standing on the runway, being denied access to his own jet, Richard couldn't help but feel the sting of betrayal. He had been retired for a few years now, having handed over the daily operations of his company to a younger management team. But he never imagined that one day, he would be treated as if he no longer mattered, as if his accomplishments meant nothing. "You don't recognize me?" Richard asked, his voice calm, but with an edge of disbelief. The man in beige shrugged, a smirk still on his face. "Nope. Doesn't ring a bell. And even if it did, it wouldn't change a thing. This jet is off limits to you." Richard took a step closer, pointing directly at the man. "I built this company. I built this jet. And I don't need your permission to board it." The man in navy laughed, shaking his head. "Yeah, sure you did, old man. And I'm the King of England." The two men laughed together, their voices echoing across the empty runway. Richard felt his anger rising. Memories of late nights, sleepless weeks, and endless sacrifices flooded his mind. He thought of his mother, who had always told him to stand up for what's right. He thought of his employees, many of whom he considered family. And he thought of his legacy, the empire he built with his own two hands. "I'll say it one more time," Richard said, his voice firmer now. "Step aside. I'm boarding my jet." But the two men didn't move. Instead, the man in beige stepped forward, his tone turning more serious. "Listen, old man. You've had your time. But times change. People like you, you're relics of the past. This world belongs to people like us now. Young, ambitious, ready to take over. So why don't you take a walk and leave this jet to the people who know how to use it? Richard's heart pounded in his chest. For a moment, he stood still, processing the sheer arrogance in front of him. These men didn't understand what it took to build something from nothing. They didn't know the sacrifices, the hardships, the failures that came before success. To them, it was all about power and control. But Richard wasn't going to back down. Reaching into his briefcase, he pulled out a thick folder of documents and held them up. "Do you see this?" he said, his voice steady. "These are the ownership papers for this jet. My name is on every single page. I built this company. I own this jet. And I'm not going anywhere." The two men exchanged uneasy glances. The smirks began to fade as they realized Richard wasn't just some old man making empty claims. The man in navy tried to regain control of the situation. "Even if you have papers, it doesn't change anything. We're in charge now. We decide who gets on and who doesn't." Richard stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You may think you're in charge. You may think you can rewrite history. But let me tell you something, legacy matters. Integrity matters. And you can't take that away from me." Just then, the airport security team approached. One of the guards recognized Richard immediately. "Mr. Price. I apologize for the misunderstanding, sir," the guard said, nodding respectfully. The two men in suits looked shocked. "Wait, you know him?" the man in beige asked. The guard nodded. "Of course. He's the founder of this company. Without him, none of this would exist." Suddenly, the smug confidence of the two men evaporated. Their faces paled as they realized their mistake. Richard didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He simply walked past them, stepping confidently onto his jet. Before boarding, he turned around one last time. "Remember this moment," he said. "Power isn't given. It's earned. And respect is something you can't buy." With that, Richard disappeared inside the jet, the door closing behind him. The two men stood in stunned silence as the engines roared to life. The jet began to taxi down the runway, leaving them behind. Richard sat back in his seat, a small smile on his face. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about standing up for what's right. For his legacy. For everything he built. Because in the end, respect always finds its way back to those who deserve it. And Richard Price? He had earned it.